in the relationship, but somehow I have absolutely don't know nothing about. And they frame me.
Walter Barton. Walter Barton was accused of Gladys Coelho's murder, a resident of a mobile home park who was 81 years old. According to the prosecution, Barton killed her with a knife during a break-in. The prosecution said that Barton was guilty because his DNA was found in the victim's clothing and he was close to the murder scene. The validity of the forensic evidence and the veracity of the major witnesses were contested throughout this trial. Despite the issues with his conviction, Barton received a death sentence. He was put to death by legal injection on May 19, 2020, after nearly 20 years on death row. After Barton was put to death, there were still questions about his culpability, which prompted fresh inquiries into the matter. When an impartial group of specialists analyzed the case, one crucial discovery surfaced after the fact. The panel came to the conclusion that the forensic evidence used in Barton's trial was seriously defective and failed to prove his guilt. In addition, fresh witness testimony and additional research cast considerable doubt on the veracity of the testimony that served as the basis for Barton's conviction. These facts increased public uproar against Barton's unjust death and fostered a growing conviction in his innocence. Despite the fact that Barton has not yet been formally determined to be innocent, there is strong evidence that his conviction and execution were errors. Nathaniel Woods. Nathaniel Woods was accused of the murders of 3 police officers during a narcotics house raid. The idea behind the prosecution's case was that Woods actively took part in the gunfight that led to the death of the cops. They contended that Woods was equally at fault for the killings due to his behavior and affiliation with the gunman. Woods' case sparked a great deal of discussion and outrage since many people felt that his conviction and subsequent execution were gravely flawed. Woods was given the death penalty despite serious doubts about the validity of the evidence and his lack of involvement in the crimes. His execution, which took place on March 5, 2020, sparked intense debate regarding the legitimacy and justice of the death sentence system. By solely relying on the testimony of the primary shooter, Kerry Spencer, who said that Woods was not engaged in the planning or execution of the crime, they claimed that the prosecution failed to show specific evidence connecting Woods to the killings. The appearance of fresh witness testimony was a significant breakthrough in Woods' posthumous battle for justice. These claims cast doubt on Woods' direct involvement in the shooting and refuted the prosecution's version of events. A number of witnesses came out to confirm that Woods was unaware of the shooter's motives and had made an effort to feign surrender before the tragic events. There was a great deal of public uproar and a growing conviction in Woods' innocence as a result of the strong evidence and witness statements. Even though Nathaniel Woods' case is still being investigated, the mounting evidence and witness accounts make a compelling case that he was wrongfully convicted and put to death. Carlton Michael Gary. Carlton Michael Gary was accused of a number of horrifying crimes that terrorized Columbus. The prosecution said Gary was guilty of several rapes and killings that targeted elderly ladies in their homes. His guilt was shown by a mix of circumstantial evidence, witness accounts, and the discovery of similar methods of operation at multiple crime locations. The legitimacy of Carlton Michael Gary's trial was called into question by the numerous problems that plagued the judicial processes surrounding his case. According to the defense, Gary was a victim of mistaken identity due to discrepancies in eyewitness testimonies and a lack of convincing physical evidence connecting him to the killings. In addition, Gary's defense team encountered difficulties that made it harder for them to make a compelling argument. They confronted little supplies, little time for planning, and a hostile atmosphere because of race. The racial dynamics of the day significantly influenced how the public perceived the case and may have had an effect on how the trial turned out. Despite many doubts about Gary's culpability, he was found guilty and given the death penalty. Carlton Michael Gary, who was 67 years old, was put to death by lethal injection on March 15, 2018. DNA testing, which was not accessible at Gary's trial, played a crucial role in reassessing his case. The prosecution's assertion that Gary was the criminal was disproved in 2017 by post-mortem DNA testing done on material retrieved from the murder scenes. The accuracy of the first inquiry and the legitimacy of the conviction are seriously questioned by these findings. Gary's culpability was questioned even more when potential alternate suspects came to light and evidence began to point in other directions. This sparked a review of the case and rekindled discussion of Gary's potential for being wrongfully convicted and put to death. Larry Swearingen. College student Melissa Trotter was brutally raped and killed, and Larry Swearingen was accused of both crimes. The prosecution's case against him was mostly supported by speculative evidence, such as purported sightings of Swearingen and Trotter together and forensic examination of objects that were discovered in his possession. Swearingen's status as the main suspect was established by the prosecution's timeline. Despite these reservations and accumulating proof of Swearingen's innocence, he was found guilty and given the death penalty. Following his conviction, Swearingen engaged in a series of lengthy appeals, legal fights, and mercy requests in an effort to prove his innocence and expose the weaknesses in the prosecution's case. After more than 20 years on death row, Larry Swearingen was put to death by lethal injection on August 21, 2019. Significant questions regarding Swearingen's culpability remained after his execution, and the search for justice went on. There are now significant doubts regarding the accuracy of Swearingen's conviction due to subsequent events and forensic investigation. DNA testing on significant pieces of evidence was done after Swearingen's death, and the results showed that his DNA was not present at the crime scene. This significant finding refuted the prosecution's case and strengthened the case for Swearingen's innocence. The forensic evidence refuted the state's theory and presented a strong case for a justice-related error. Dominique Ray. Dominique Ray was accused of rape and murder in connection with the unfortunate death of a little girl. The prosecution's case against him was mostly supported by witness testimony, forensic examination, and circumstantial evidence. After being detained, Ray had to go through a trial that would fundamentally change the trajectory of his life. Ray's legal path revealed a number of injustices and procedural mistakes that compromised the fairness of his trial. The violation of his religious liberties was one of the most upsetting parts of his case. Ray, a devoted Muslim, asked that an imam be present when he was put to death. Alabama's regulations at the time, nevertheless, only allowed a Christian chaplain to be present. Serious moral and legal questions were raised by this infringement on Ray's fundamental rights, notably his right to freedom of religion. The state of Alabama carried out Ray's execution notwithstanding the ongoing legal dispute surrounding his religious liberties. He was executed by lethal injection on February 7, 2019, forfeiting his chance to properly seek justice and maybe prove his innocence. After Ray was put to death, his legal team kept working to clear his reputation and find the truth. After Ray was executed, a significant development in his case came to light. A written declaration from a person who confessed to the crime for which Ray had been convicted was one of the new pieces of evidence that surfaced. This information strengthened the notion that Ray had been falsely charged and put to death.